Now, according to the Unexplained Mysteries website and other places, scientists in Mexico are carrying out X-ray scans and other scans on these alien mummies to find out more about them. Reportedly this week, and again I'm saying reportedly, the scientists are saying that they are one skeleton. They're not assembled from a kit of parts. So that, if that is true, would seem to take away from the theory that these were dolls that were bought and wrapped in papier-mâché, and an alien body was created in that way. I'm confused. I was confused until I got this email a couple of days ago from Will Garrison in the United States. And Will said, and I'm going to read it, I've been following the case of the so-called alien mummies since they were first presented to the public by Thierry Jamin in 2016. I've been in frequent contact with Thierry over this period. I've been to Peru twice to examine and study the mummies, most recently in June of this year when I spent 2 weeks examining some new specimens. I'm a musician by profession, but I have enough scientific literacy to explain the most recent findings. Let's find out. Will Galison, thank you for coming on my show and thank you for emailing me this week.
Oh, my pleasure, Howard. I can't see you for some reason, but well, maybe that's...
That is a blessing in disguise, Will, I think you'll find.
Is it?
Talk to me, first of all, then, about you. Why have you investigated these things since, what, 2016?
Yes, indeed. I've been interested in the UFO phenomenon, and well, there you are. Since I was a teenager, I had what I consider to be experiences when I was a child and into my teens involving beings, seeing beings and in my space and stuff like that. And I guess that's why it's been a passion of mine. So when I saw a YouTube on video, on YouTube by Thierry Jamin, this was in the very early days when he had just received a few of these artifacts. And he basically put them online and said, does anybody know what these are? And I didn't know what they are, but I was very intrigued. Mm-hmm. I contacted him. Turns out we were in France at the same time in a small town, a great coincidence. And I got to know him there. And I became very convinced that these were really something very important. And I've been in touch with Thierry ever since. In 2018, I went down to Peru with Robert Salas. He's the official launch officer. You probably had him on your show.
I have.
Yeah, a very important witness in the UFO phenomenon. And Rob's a friend of mine, and we went down there to see these things for ourselves. And there was a conference at that time in Lima in front of before the Congress of Peru, not the Congress of Mexico. And there were a lot of scientists and experts of various kinds, doctors, who were looking at these mummies and reviewing test results. And they were, as far as I saw, everybody there was sanguine about this thing being a real, the remains of a once living being. That's the question. That's the main question here. So everybody seemed to be in support of that, including DNA experts, et cetera. So I came away from there very convinced. I mean, I'm not a scientist, and one has to take, unfortunately, in this world, one has to take the word of people that have more expertise. It gets tricky when people who have more expertise than you start disagreeing with each other, because then you have to basically choose which way you're going to go.
You do. And this is a very tricky, difficult area, and everybody will have their 10 cents worth, at least, on this one.
Yes.
What was it about them, and you can tell me more, I'm sure, about how they were found. What was it about them that convinced you that they were genuine?
Well, the original time that I saw them in 2018, they were being kept in a secret facility. Clearly it was, there was something mysterious about these things, and the people were taking great care to keep them from being retrieved from the government, which had apparently tried to get them back. Now, there is a great mystery as to how these things were actually discovered. They were, where we know the chain of custody for sure is that they were given to Thierry Jamin, who's a French archaeologist who lives in Peru. And they were given to him by a tomb robber, a known tomb robber who calls himself Mario. His real name is known, but he's known in this whole story generally as Mario. And Mario has an astonishing story about finding them. He says that he and his crew were going through the Nazca Desert. By the way, I just want to correct, at one point you said that they were found in Cusco, the ones that Jaime Maussan. It is possible, I don't think they were found in Cusco, because Cusco is not a desert. These mummies, at least all the ones that I know about, were found in the Nazca Desert, which is quite distant from Cusco. Cusco's in the mountains. So just to clarify that. But Mario said that he found these, he went into a cave that he had never seen before, an opening that was covered with rocks. He found a large sarcophagus inside, very large, and inside were dozens of these bodies. And another class of mummy, which we're not discussing at this moment, there is only one example of those which has been shown to the public, the one they call Maria, which is much more humanoid looking, has very human face, clearly an actual remains of a being. But as human as it looks, it has 3 fingers on each hand and 3 toes on each feet. And the facile response would be, oh, they chopped off a couple of fingers, but it gets much more complicated than that. These fingers have an extra digit on them, where we have 1 in the hand, 2, 3, 4. This one has a 5th digit on the end. And that digit has a very delicate fingerprint in it. I mean, and there is no sign of bonding between, and there's no breaks in the skin. So it looks like, to a lot of experts, it looks like a very authentic 3-fingered humanoid, whatever that might be.
All right. And as far as you know, and I'm sorry to jump in, because this is fascinating, but as far as you know, was anything buried with them? Anything that might give authenticity to the claim that they're not of this earth?
Oh, well, that's a very good question. There are, on several of these mummies, particularly one that they call Josephina. And by the way, I should say, anybody interested in this should go to the website the-alien-project.com. Whether it's the right name for the website, I don't know, but that's what it is. the-alien-project.com. And there they have CAT scans, CT scans, X-rays, and all the data from the DNA tests, from the carbon-14 tests, and metallurgical tests. And I bring up the metallurgical test because you asked, is there anything separate from the bodies that could help place these things? Well, on several of the bodies, I should add that I was privileged recently to see some mummies that have not been, that are definitely of this family, which have not been exposed to the public. And I mention that because these new ones that I saw also had these metal, I call them accoutrements on them. One is like a breastplate. It almost looks like a bikini top. It's made out of metal, certainly. This was on Josephina, which is one of the mummies that was most studied and most tested. They tested the metal on that, and it's an amalgam, an alloy, which was used by the Incans 1,000 years ago. Now that correlates to the carbon dating of all of these small mummies, and there are many. The question of how Jaime came upon these is a total mystery to me. It's a total mystery to Thierry, who's quite involved with the case. And it is also problematic that they were taken out of Brazil. Those are some eggs. I guess those are, I just saw, in Josephina, she has 2 remarkable things. One of is these metal plates, and the other are eggs inside. I believe what you're seeing on this are Jaime's, and this is from recent footage. But there's similar footage when they were exploring the ones that that Mario gave to Thierry.
The investigations, Will, that have been done on these, and I'm sorry, here I am jumping in again. It's just that we have to make the most of every minute.
Absolutely.
Do those investigations rule out the possibility that what we're looking at is something that it is in some way modified after death, an animal that somebody had tried, perhaps for a religious practice, for veneration, whatever, had tried to modify the skeleton, the body of some kind of creature to look like something that they could worship, if that makes any sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and I really appreciate the tone of your question, because generally I get the question, are they fake or are they real? And that's not the right question, quite, in my opinion. I will say that the most compelling evidence that I've looked at for and against the reality of these as being off, because the first question is, are they remains of a once living being? The second question is, could they be, are they a modern, if they're not real remains of a once living being, are they modern production, modern manufacture, or are they something made 1,000 years ago? So I think the most compelling evidence, and again on both sides, is the skull, because that's certainly something you cannot fabricate, a skull. It has to come from some kind of animal. And there has been a paper written by one of the people very involved with the case, which suggests, and he's not the first to suggest it, that the skull is made of or derived from a manipulated camelid skull. Camelid is the type of animal that includes camels, alpacas, llamas, that kind of thing. And certainly there are plenty of them in South America.
So is what we're just saying, Will, that they were manufactured? Let's leave aside whether they're fake or not. Well, it's what we're reading today into them, because the people who put them where they were put were not intending them to be anything other than something that they venerated. We're saying, oh, alien. So you're saying that if the skull has those origins, it's not alien. Is that so?
Well, unless you really want to stretch it and say they put a llama skull on an alien body. Now, there are many questions, and that's a bit of a stretch for me. I would say if you have a llama skull, you're probably dealing not necessarily with llama bones, but with a collection of bones from other animals. And there's an argument for that. And I'm going to disappoint your audience perhaps by not taking a final stance on this. I have gone back and forth a million times. I've spoken to the scientists and read papers, and some of them suggest that this is probably derived from a llama skull. And indeed, if you look at the paper, you can see the similarities. It's very difficult that two biological objects would have co-evolved to look so similar.
Okay, now look, there will be people saying, "Oh, well, I told you so. They're made from animals." But that's not entirely the point, I don't think, because the people who made this all those years ago, the people who produced them for a reason. And did they produce them to look like something that they had experienced? Were they making a small-scale model of something that they had seen?
Or a life-size model.
Or indeed, yes, as you say, a life-size model.
Yeah.
How fascinating.
I just and what I was saying there, that there are other doctors, including the ones and experts, the ones that accompanied Maussan in Mexico City, and they are saying, and putting their reputations on the line, saying that these are skeletons of a piece and that they're not assembled, that they have all the integrity of one. So there you are, two camps of scientists who are saying, opposite things. And as you know very well, there are many, many scientists who are very prejudiced toward there not being alien life on Earth, mainstream science particularly, for various reasons. And there are scientists within, let's say, the UFO community who are quite committed, invested in the idea that there could be.
All right.
So,
Well, crucial question then. Are you assured and convinced that the ones presented in Mexico by Jaime Maussan were of the same origins and derivation of the ones that you yourself have seen?
That's a good question. Because I've seen the X-rays and the CT scans, it would seem to me, I would give it a large probability that they are from the same batch, if you will, or the same species. Now, one of the big questions is how they got them out of Peru, because that's very illegal. And he even admitted they came from Peru. If he had said we found them in Mexico, that would have been a different story. So he's in a little bit of trouble in that regard. He's got some splaining to do, as they say. But yes, the question of whether they could be made, this is where I want to get into some of the anomalies. And you're looking as if I'm run out of time. I have some.
I'm getting anxious looks from my producer Mark here, and I don't want to cross Mark. Look, I tell you what. Let's take those commercials that we've got to take now. I'm just talking to Mark through the glass here, and I'll come back to you, and we'll wrap it up for 2 minutes if that's okay with you, Will. Yeah. Will Garrison in the US talking about those so-called alien mummies, and we've heard some interesting stuff there that still leaves a number of questions unanswered. We'll have a go in a couple of minutes from now at answering some of them. Stay here. Back to Will Galison. We're talking about Jaime Maussan, the alien mummies so-called. We have heard that they may have been created involving llama skulls, heads. We still don't know that the people who created them did not or did, I think whether was missing from that sentence. We don't know whether the people who created them did not or did mean them to resemble something that they knew, because they're definitely very odd. I think, Will, listen, there's only one question I have to ask you. Bearing in mind that Jaime Maussan presented these so-called alien mummies in Mexico, and they are supposedly still being ongoingly examined, what do you think is going to happen next?
Well, I believe that there are some tests that could be definitive and prove once and for all what these mummies are, and I'd be happy to discuss some of them. Howard, if you don't mind, I'd like to answer your question, your previous question about. I believe this. You asked about the whether these were made recently or whether they were made by an ancient culture. Because if they're made recently, I think we can be assured that they're not. There's no great significance.
Well, you were telling me that scans put them way back.
Well, the carbon dating, all of the components of these things are about 1,000 years old. So, but again, that doesn't answer the question whether they were cobbled together in 2018, or 2010, or in 1010. And I will tell you, rather than say, what indicates that they were made in the past, I'll say, what indicates that they weren't made by a fraudster today? For one thing, they have these metal accoutrements, for example, and they are on many of the mummies. A lot of the new mummies that I saw had many of these metal pieces. They're made out of this ancient alloy, which seems like
that kind of dates them. So the question that hangs in the air is why, and we can only assume and maybe do further research. I'm sorry that we've got to wrap it up, Will, and I'm sure you have a place online where people can go to check out your work. I asked you what you think is going to happen next. I wonder if you can tell me in just a sentence what you think.
What I'm hoping is that some money will come to this. Now, perhaps this is the bright side of Jaime's presentation, is that some money will come to neutral people. I think the Incari Institute in Cusco, Peru, with Thierry Jamin would be the perfect people. Get them some money to do the definitive tests, the DNA tests.
Don't you think that Oxford in the UK and Harvard in the United States or Stanford need to be doing that? And then we'll get some proper answers?
Thank you very much. I don't mean that Thierry should do them himself. He should farm them out. He should have the money to pay the people at Oxford. Unfortunately, you don't find scientists and professors at Harvard or Oxford dying to jump into a conflict like this, because it can make them look bad, or it can give them a lot of stress.
Well, listen, we need to talk some more about this, Will. What is your website so that people can look at it?
Okay, it's a musical website, not a mummy website. No. It's Will Galison, GALISON.net.
You are one mean harmonica player. Unfortunately, we can't hear that now, but check him out on his website.